There we go. John Schertzer, Executive Director, lead the staff team here. We have a great 14-member team that works out of our office in Indianapolis, Indiana. Two remote employees who work from other places, but we've all been working remotely, obviously, for the last half of a year at least. Someone else maybe to point out, the SPJ headquarters box on the screen is Jennifer Royer. She takes minutes for these meetings. She's a staff member and our Director of Communications. So just note that that's happening while we meet. And there's other staff members on the call as well, but Matt, I don't know if you want me to go through.
Yeah, if you want to introduce them, that'd be great.
So we have Linda Hall on the call. She is our office manager. We have, I'm looking there, Nate Rushton, who's our staff accountant. Saw him on. We have Jake Koenig, who is our CPA and a controller, and we'll meet him later as we talk through the budget. And Larry Messing is here. He is our Director of Development. And Lou Harry, who is our Quill editor and now coordinates our awards program for SPJ. I think I got everybody. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Bailing and Jerry, there won't be a quiz, so rest easy. I apologize at how rushed this is. Obviously, it's a big agenda, and there will be ample time for us all to get to know each other today and in future meetings. But Bailing, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Bailing Shaw, and in my day job, I am Dean of the College of Communications at Cal State Fullerton. It is the only College of Communications in the 23 campus system of the California State University, which some of you may know is the country's largest public ed system in higher education. So before I joined Cal State Fullerton, I was at San Diego State University, where I was director of the School of Journalism and Media Studies. And while I was there, I also had the privilege of being on the San Diego chapter of SPJ board for about 3 years. So thank you, and I'm excited to be here with y'all.
Thanks, Bailing. Jerry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry McCormick. I am, in my day job, I am a senior public information officer for the city of San Diego. I'm a longtime member of the National Association of Black Journalists. I founded the NABJ chapter here in San Diego. I would describe myself as a very student-focused journalist. I work really, really hard to teach students about journalism. At night, I work at San Diego State teaching broadcast journalism. I'm a former newspaper reporter. I'm a former broadcast reporter. So I kind of have my hands on a little bit of everything, and I'm really glad to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. And one thing Jerry didn't mention is that he just, in recent months, founded an NABJ chapter at San Diego State University. So thanks for doing that, Jerry. Okay. I appreciate it. Welcome aboard. We're going to have a busy year and a busy meeting. And let's start that with public comment. Does any member here want to speak? And if so, just raise your hand or note it in the chat field, and I'll call on you as you do. Tim, do you want to talk?
Sure, Matt. Thank you very much. My name is Tim Igo. I'm the president of the SPJ Pro Chapter in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I have a comment about something coming up later in your agenda. I don't know if you want all of the non-board opinion dump to be right here, or because I probably have something to say about the convention site selection topic. So your choice.
Yeah, if you can hold off on that, we'll have that conversation
Awesome.
in public, at least to start. So let's have you weigh in there. Right. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Any other members want to talk?
Looks like Andy wants to say something.
Michael
Savino.
Oh, Mike Savino.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw in the chat. Michael first, if you don't mind, Andy, and then we'll go to you. Michael Savino.
Thanks, Matt. I'm Mike Savino. Some of you know me. I used to be on the national board. I'm also vice president of the Connecticut Pro Chapter. That's why I'm speaking to you all today. I just wanted to make you aware of a letter we sent to Matt last night regarding our regional coordinator. And I know some of you, or perhaps all of you, are aware of some issues we've been having with her, but things seem to escalate. She was, as you know, sworn in recently, and within days of that, she asked that 3 members of our board, including myself, that we resign from the board. So one of the things that we sent to Matt was a letter of support from well over half of our membership signed on just this week. So we certainly don't intend to resign, and we have the support of our chapter. But the bigger issue is that this is an ongoing issue with our regional coordinator, where she continues to attack other members of our organization and attack journalists in general since being elected. She's making baseless allegations against us that we are not supporting her in her battle with media suppression. She's also making baseless allegations against police departments. We've tried numerous times to get information from her about what kind of suppression she's facing, and yet she has not given us a meeting. She's not talked with us. She just asked that we resign instead. But just in the last week, things continue to escalate. Just today, actually, she sent an email to the New York Times saying that Nicole Hannah-Jones basically stole her ideas for the 1619 project. There's some other conspiracy theories in there that I'd rather not give legitimacy to in here, but they're very concerning and involve other writers as well. And I'm happy to share that with the board. She's also taken to Twitter this week to basically, go against SPJ's stance that anybody can be a journalist, saying that journalists need to prove their credentials, including education. They need to show that they have a journalism degree. And in a lot of these things, she's using her, she's touting her position as Region 1 coordinator or using the SPJ logo. She sent an email to the New York Times and some local newsrooms here in Connecticut this week, basically trying to strong arm them to be on a task force on diversity. And while that's a great idea, she concluded that email with some kind of vague threat to their funding if they don't help her out. So this is just ongoing. And so in the letter, one of the letters that we sent to the board, we ask that you, one, sign on our membership's letter in support of us, but also that you really start to take some action against our Region 1 coordinator. I don't know legally what ability you guys have, but I think we really need to start taking this seriously. And also that we get some kind of inquiry into the nominating process and what kind of vetting went into these candidates, if there needs to be changes, because it's really concerning that we're now just 2.5 months into her 2-year term, and we've seen escalating problems here in Connecticut.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you speaking today. I appreciate you passing along that information, most or all of which the board has. I did forward Connecticut's letter from last night to them. I am aware of the email with the New York Times today, and the board has received that as well. And we take this seriously, I just want you to know, and appreciate the efforts that everyone in the chapter is doing for SPJ and for journalism, and know that we will discuss this and be back in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Thanks. I'll be very quick. I'm speaking today as the chair of the Awards and Honors Committee, and I wanted to share with the board that we are expanding our contest for the coming year in some exciting ways. We have additional categories. We are adding additional COVID-related categories, so that work is not crowded out by other work, and we can recognize many different types of good journalism. But my plea to the board is to help us. We will have more categories, so we will need more judges. And I know many people do judge and pitch in a lot. If you are not currently a judge or have not tried it before, I urge you to volunteer, because we will need the help. It's a worthwhile thing, and that's how we end up with a student summit to congratulate excellent campus journalism, because we have people that can review it and credit it. So please join in.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks for all your efforts at the Student Summit leading up to it and beyond it. And I would echo what Andy just said about being a judge. I've been a judge for journalism at every level, including the campus and pro national contests that we have. And it is energizing and fun to take part in that. So I would encourage not just the board members, but maybe chapter members too, and unaffiliated members if they want to take part. Let me see, I see a couple board members with their hands up. Let me go to make sure that there's any other members of the public first that would like to talk. Seeing none, I think Raphael had his hand up first, and then I'll go to Rebecca.
Okay, I just wanted to ask real quickly, we did hear from Connecticut. I wanted to ask if Anne Marie is here. If she is not here, if there's anybody here who can or wishes to speak on her behalf, I just wanted to make sure that they had any opportunity to come forward now, just so that we could hear from them if they want to.
Anyone? Seeing nothing. It doesn't look like she's on the call. Thank you for asking that, Raphael. I know I said I go to you next, Rebecca, but it looks like Jennifer is raising her hand. So let me go as a member of the public, quote unquote, to Jennifer first.
So I wasn't aware of this information about the Region 1 coordinator, but as a Region 12 coordinator, I would like to say that we have not, as part of the regional coordinators committee, we have not heard a peep from the Region 1 coordinator since she's been elected.
Is that just a follow-up question? Have you reached out to her proactively, or has she just not responded to you in absence of that?
She's been included on probably more than 30 emails.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Andy, this is a question for you. The judges, do they have to be SPJ members? Because I'd like to help you. I'm sorry?
They do not. And if it helps, people might think, well, this is a big time commitment. We have actually a really good system in place, especially for the SDX awards, where we have judging groups. And so we can break it up and you don't have to read every entry. You split them up, you come together with finalists, and it's a good system where we can kind of break up the work in a manageable way. But we encourage anybody who would be a coordinator for that category to recruit people that you know and trust and have them work with you as a group, as many as you want.
All right, feel free to reach out to me. I can help you, especially from other journalism groups. You know, we exchange.
Awesome. One of the things, just sorry not to get too far afield on this, but we will have a category this year on inequity in social inequity, and we will be gathering the different affinity groups together to help take on a topic that affects many different people, you know, throughout society. We want to get different viewpoints. So we already have that built in, but that's really just for one category, plus our New America Award. We already do that as well. I would welcome any new people inside or outside SPJ. So we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for that offer, Rebecca. I'll note, I'm not sure if you're raising your hand to speak, but Yvette Davila Richards has joined us. So let the minutes reflect that. And Yvette, did you want to say something?
Yes, good afternoon to everyone, and glad to be here. Andy, I'm here and willing, able to help judge. I've done it numerous times with the Deadline Club, and we have coordinated to make it easier on people because of working lives, family lives. So I also want to extend the call to other non-journalists. So great question, Rebecca, on wanting to know if non-SPJ members could serve as judges. So I have people that I know I can reach out to as well.
You're hired.
And that actually might be a really great way to let people know about SPJ and see if they want to be a prospective member. So I appreciate you guys asking that question and having that discussion. Seeing no other public comment, I'm going to forge ahead to our budget discussion. And just to tee it up, I'll pass the mic to John and to Jake in a minute, but I will say that in the backup material, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different reports related to our budget and our Q3 status, all of which is really positive. For the first time in about 3 years, we're actually going to have a balanced budget, assuming that the board signs off on such. And so I think that's a testament to 2 things. One is the great and noble work at the staff level, and also, sadly to say, the pandemic, which has curtailed obviously a lot of our travel expenses. But we've made the most of that, meeting by Zoom, and John has put together a budget that the Finance Committee approved unanimously when it met earlier this week. And with that, John, why don't you please take it away?
Thanks, Matt, and I'll let Jake also fill in where he wants to. Just as a reminder to the board and anyone watching that, a budget is a management tool. It's a roadmap. The ultimate destination we still want to arrive to, right? Which in this case is a surplus. But we may at times have to take other pathways we weren't expecting. So, but for now, I think this is a pretty good pathway. It definitely emphasizes some areas where we think we can improve, including membership, our events, and on awards, things that we'll put a lot of energy towards because that's what has been requested as far as our strategic plan and annual plan is going. I don't think those things are too pie in the sky. I think they're realistic projections. And we're trying our best to cut expenses where it makes sense. So with that, maybe it's just best to let you ask questions and we'll try to address them. But Jake, do you have any other introductory comments you want to make?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, a lot of the things that I put out are in the memorandum. In other words, we're still putting Google and Facebook in here. We're switching the staff structure around a little bit, different people doing different jobs, trying to be more efficient in that area. We don't have as many outside contractors in this budget. We're utilizing in-house staff for that. And of course, the big changes, we've got the educational program grant that the foundation provided to us, and that is in this budget. And the total award was just under $200,000, and a portion of that, $50,000, was paid out to SPJ in the current quarter that we're in, because we started incurring the expenses that we asked to be covered under that grant. And the 3/4 of it, or $150,000, is coming into our budget during this current year to fund that program as we put the proposal together. So I think that's really the main things I wanted to point out. Everything, I think we're being conservative in our association management position. We're only including the employee or the clients that we have in-house right now. And we're kind of ramped down on the amount of work that we're doing for them because they're naturally not putting on all their programs and doing all their things because of COVID. So I think that's, I think we've got a conservative amount going there. I think John worked pretty closely with different people on the membership side of the budget, and we think that where we're at is good with that. And those, of course, the awards, membership are our major revenue streams. And in this budget, we are planning on going ahead with a convention, but I can let John talk to you more about that and things like that. But it is in this budget as if we were going to have a convention.
John, for the benefit of our new members, why don't you explain a little bit about the convention and what 2021 might look like? I know we're talking about 2022 later, so if you can keep it brief, but I think that would be helpful to Jerry and Bailing especially.
Sure. I'm noticing on my end that I'm a little pixelated and all that, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I hope my internet isn't unstable, but okay, good. 2021, we are under contract to be at the Hyatt in New Orleans. And so that contractual obligation would carry forth a penalty should we want to, not host that event. So we're planning right now to host that event in person September 3rd through the 5th, I believe. I'm sorry, I tried to pull all this stuff out of the top of my head, but it's early in September, Labor Day weekend, actually. And so the budget indicates holding that event in person. And this will be a first year in a long time we've been doing an event. We will do an event without a partner organization. So some of the budget aspects are very different in that we are anticipating we'll realize all revenue and we'll incur all expenses, obviously. And we think that, you know, there's ways in which we can, in prior years, we've used a service to get our exhibitors and our sponsors, and then had to pay them a commission. And in this year, we think we can perform that in-house. Things like that contribute to the fact that we see a pretty healthy bottom line on the event if it were to happen. And that is anticipating about 490 attendees, which is roughly what we get on an average year.
Thank you. And thanks for that overview. Go to the questions from the board, and I see Lauren, as expected, has her hand up first.
Yeah.
Matt.
Matt, could I say something real quick?
Sure, Jake. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I should have led with this because there's a lot of new faces and things like that. And I just wanted to note that when we put this budget together, it's built from the ground up, and that everyone in the organization is involved in the budgeting process. So, you know, people that are in the awards program analyze the awards program based upon historical, based upon what they think is going to happen, based upon what they think they're going to need to put on that program. And they get quotes and put their budget together. And then that budget is reviewed with John for, you know, on the higher level, saying, is that where we want to go? Is this what we want to do? And then I end up putting that into a master budget. And so we take all of our individual budgets, drop them into this master budget, and then that is what, you know, again, John reviews and goes over and we fine tune it. But I just wanted people to know that it's pretty in depth, and we don't just say, okay, well, you know, we had this much last year, we're going to increase it by 5%. The only time we've ever really done that is like on things like office supplies, where it doesn't make any sense to delve into the details. But anyway, it's a well thought out plan, and nothing is perfect. You can't predict the future, but we have good basis for everything that we put in here, and it came from every staff member that we have. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Jake. And I think that's a good point to make kind of holistically. I've been on the board many years and seen some stretch budgets that we knew that going in, it was risky, and we approved them anyway, and they didn't materialize. This one, as John and Jake have said, seems, don't take my word for it, ask your questions, but it seems conservative. And so I think it is a pretty sound budget. And now, Lauren, you wanted to say something. I'll give you the mic.
Thank you. Wanted to say something and ask a question. So the first thing I wanted to do is thank Jake and John. They put a lot of work into this budget. To the point Matt made, we have had some smoke and mirror type budgets once or twice in the past, and that's not what we're doing here. So I know how much time, especially Jake, had to spend on this. So I want to say thank you. I
appreciate that.
Of course. Yeah, we're very lucky to have you. I wanted to share an observation that people may not understand. The silver lining that COVID had for SPJ was us saving a bunch of money. And so that actually helped us get out of the red. So just wanted to share that for people who aren't looking at this closely. And then just the one question that I have is, in terms of the convention, if for some reason circumstances don't allow us to have it in person and we would need to do SPJ 2021 virtually, how would that impact the budget?
Yeah, so this year, for example, that decision ended up impacting the budget in probably a negative sense, but in a pretty limited sense, in that we were able to get out of our hotel contract unscathed, and we were able to make quite a bit of sponsorship revenue and registration revenue on our virtual event. Now, the convention budget does incorporate that staff time is being spent on the event, and some of that helps then fund staff salary and things like that. So in the end, Jake would know the formulas a little bit better, but this next year, it would all be dependent in my mind on, could we get out of the hotel contract or postpone New Orleans to a future year or things like that. That if we can do that, then virtual events, if we were able to pull off what we did this past year, are pretty good revenue makers for us because we're able to do so much in-house.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. And thanks for those questions, or that question and those comments, Lauren. Bei-Ling.
Hi, I have a newbie question, actually two. So I noted in one of the documents that SPJ switched to calendar year operations. And so my first question is when that happened, and then how that, and if it was recent, how that transition was handled. And then my second question is about document 6A2, because I'm not sure how to read it, because the header says calendar year 2021, and then under proposed and adopted, it says FY. And so I just want to know how I'm supposed to read that particular one. Thank you.
Yes, and I can address part of that. I'm not sure what, I'm looking at a spreadsheet on my computer, so I don't know what document you're talking about, but it's probably just a cosmetic issue that I did not change. But this is all a calendar year 2021 budget. And we switched over to a calendar year in 2019. So our normal fiscal year ended in July. And so what we did is we had a short year from August 1st to December 31st, 2019. And we just finished filing the tax return for that time period. Normally we have an audit done every single year for our organization, but they did not do an audit during the short time period. What they'll do is and we'll have an audit in 2021 for calendar year 2020, but they'll also go back that 6 months into 2019. So we will have an 18-month audit in 2021 that is for the past 18 months that were never covered before. So the entire range of when we switched and went all to the new one will be reviewed by the auditors in question, and they'll comment on that in their auditing report. And the nice thing about it is that when we went out and got quotes for them to complete this budget is that they weren't increasing the cost for us. So you talk about another COVID saving cost and another cost of this. We didn't have to spend $17,000 this year on a budget because because of the switch to the calendar year, and they didn't increase the price to do an 18-month versus 12-month. So that's kind of where it happened, but there's so much cost savings involved in work in doing the budget or doing our operating facility on a calendar year basis as opposed to a physical year basis. So we made that suggestion because of all the issues that we had with it, and thankfully the board agreed to that, and we went ahead and did it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for that answer, Jake. And a quick follow-up. So typically in past years, the Finance Committee looked at the audit. I'm trying to remember, you can help me out, January or February? When should we expect to see that audit, the next audit as a Finance Committee?
We have not got a specific time yet for the audit. They sent me proposals, and to be honest, I just didn't have time to look at what their proposals were. But we're a calendar year basis, and so what happens is that the auditors get a lot of requests, for the first 3 or 4 months of the year, and if we put our audit off later on in the year, we end up saving money because they're incentivizing us to not do it right away. So we have 5.5 months to complete our tax return for the year, and generally our goal is, well, it's not a goal, it's we get the audit done first, then they complete the tax return based upon the audited financial statements and go from there. So, but we can extend the return. I would anticipate it being in May and June, to summarize. Okay. I just wanted to tell you a little bit of background.
No, that's good to know, and I appreciate that. And I will just say for the public, for the record, that when I first talked to Bei-Ling about the possibility of serving, one of her first questions was, can I see the audited financial statements? So that's the kind of board member that we have with us.
All right.
There's a question from Bob Becker, and then I'll go to you, Jerry. But Bob asks, is it cost prohibitive to insure against having to cancel the New Orleans conference? I guess that's a question for you, John. It's in the chat as well.
Is it cost prohibitive? You mean buying event insurance, Bob? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Great. Actually, our events consultant who will be joining the call later when we talk about future options has been shopping for some policies on that very thing. But I don't know, it may be at this point cost prohibitive because of where we are in this at this time frame, right? So buying insurance about an event that's less than a year away in the middle of a pandemic may be pretty expensive. So we will look at it, but unfortunately, we didn't have it in place prior to now.
Yeah, I guess my concern, John, is that last year was a unique situation where people might have been more willing to give you, just vacate void the contract.
Right.
And the next time it may be they say, well, you should have known better than to set this up again.
Right. Yeah, I think if I'm guessing, if we want to move out of that contract, we're gonna have to negotiate out of it, meaning that we're gonna have to get future business and probably, have some penalty, but hopefully not too steep.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Bob, for that question, and John for that answer. And Jerry.
My question actually piggybacks on that. I was wondering, when is the drop dead date to get out of this contract? Because the reason I'm asking is people have to plan for flights and hotel and that and vacation time. And it's frustrating if you're kind of in this holding pattern where are we going, are we not going? And then also if we decide we're going to do this, when will we let the membership know that it's a go?
Good questions. Last year, we made the decision, I believe, in May prior to a September event. You could make the decision all the way up to, even closer than that. Obviously, you don't want to. If March 1st is sort of the time frame when the next escalation of cancellation fee comes. So if we thought to ourselves, well, we'll just stomach the cancellation fee, and it's 6 figures, so I don't know that we'd want to do that. But if we were to say that, we'd want to make that decision before March 1. But to negotiate to a future opportunity, we could do that within any time frame. But to your point, your greater point, normally we'd open early bird registration in April, and that's when people would start planning. And so I would suggest we'd want a pretty healthy idea of if it's a go or a no-go by that March timeframe as well, just for that reason.
Thanks, Jerry. Great question. And thank you, John, for that, giving us that sense of the timing. Any other board members with a question on the budget or on the third quarter financial statement? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget.
I move to approve the budget.
Oh, I was raising to second. Okay.
Well timed. Motion by Lauren, second by Yvette Davila Richards. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. And I'll just echo again what I said earlier and what Lauren emphasized, that Jake and John, I really do appreciate you giving us a realistic, solid budget. It's going to help us get off to a fast start this year. So thank you very much to headquarters.
Thank you all. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
And with that, we've come to the next item on the agenda, the 2022 convention site selection. And I know Tim has a question, but I'm going to go to the board first. But before that, I want to ask for a motion to discuss part of this in open session and then part of this in closed session. We got some late bids that I think we need to discuss in closed session. So I would ask to kind of splinter the conversation I guess at this point, I'm just asking for a motion to change the agenda to allow us to talk about the bids in closed session, and I'll entertain that motion.
I'd like to make that motion because I made that request to you, Matt, via email.
Thank you, Lauren.
Everyone's okay with that?
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Raphael. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. And with that, John, why don't you discuss what we can discuss in public session, and then we'll go from John's presentation, Tim, to your question first, and then back to the board. So John, you can start us off.
Okay. If you could give me actually 1 second, our events consultant we didn't think we were gonna move this fast, and she was gonna join us for this portion, so I'm trying to get in touch with her to come on board.
I run a lean meeting, man. Come on.
I know, right? So, but if I could try to get in touch with her,
Okay.
give me 1 minute. Maybe
I
Tim could
appreciate
go
that.
all after that.
Why don't I jump ahead to the next item on the agenda, and then we can come back when she joins us to number 7. The next item is more of a discussion. It's outreach to the new White House administration. I wanted to, in the event of the transition to the Biden administration, which isn't happening as quickly in all places of the country as maybe it could. My editorial comment. But I do think SPJ has a unique opportunity here in coordination with a lot of other journalism organizations. And there are some that we've already been in touch with about what we hope to hear from the new administration and how we can influence some of that discussion, right? You know, as a board that we've been very active in asking law enforcement to stop the arrests of journalists. And in the past, we have been very active in a lot of issues at a federal level, from preventing journalists from getting harassed at the border as they cross, to cracking down on whistleblowers and the failure to release freedom of information requests and data as quickly as you could. And this is important because it wasn't only the Trump administration that was tough on journalists. The Obama administration, as many of you will recall, was really difficult, prosecuted whistleblowers and put up roadblocks to get that information. And so a few years ago, SPJ actually was part of a mission to get in front of the Obama administration, led by former President Paul Fletcher. So we have kind of a roadmap on how to get there, and we're working closely with other organizations. Just Friday, working closely with the FOI committee, and this particularly Catherine Foxhall, who, for those who don't know, is a DC member who for years has been a huge advocate in the effort to have PIOs give more information at a government level. I see you there, Jerry. We're not talking about you. But to have PIOs at a federal level really not be roadblocks to information, but to be purveyors of information. And so with that said, I just want to tee it up and ask you all as board members, what items do you think that us and other journalism organizations should try to have the Biden administration work on? I'm not talking about specific legislation necessarily, but more broader issues. And I'll just open it up for a quick conversation as we're waiting for our reinforcements on the other issue. Bailing.
I have a question. Are we going to talk about the FOI committee report as part of this, or is that a separate thing? Because I have a question.
Usually that's separate, but
Okay.
if you want to bring it up, we certainly can discuss that. In past, there have been discussions about those committee reports. In the interest of time, we can see how much time we have. I was going to call your attention to that. Those reports are there. So if you have a question about it, it's probably germane to this discussion. So why don't you just go ahead and ask it now?
Yeah, it actually is. So I was curious because I wanted to understand more about the Press the Flesh initiative, which first, I'm wondering if that's really the best name for this initiative. And second, I'm wondering if we really mean lobbying, because that entails journalists registering as lobbyists. And if that's not what we really mean, then perhaps that committee report could be amended to say advocacy instead of lobbying, because there's kind of a difference. And I just want to be sure I understand which one we're proposing.
Good questions. Let me see if Haston Willis is on the call. I don't think that he is, but Michael Koretsky, the Region 3 regional coordinator who helped come up with this idea is. Michael, do you want to field those questions really quick?
I can try. Yes, the idea is to, we actually tested this out. Lynn Walsh, former ethics chair, former president of SPJ, did this at a college media convention where we hired a lobbyist to teach journalists how to lobby their own lawmakers, what techniques SPJ has had a long history of going both chapters to their state capitals and SPJ, as you're discussing now, going to DC, and we've had not great results. And when you break it down, it's because we know journalism, we don't necessarily know lobbying. So the idea, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I would love to help this committee with that work, but I really think it's important for us to understand lobbying is like its own whole separate thing. And from what you're saying, we're not lobbying, right? Because lobbying does involve registering with blah, blah, blah. So I think especially because it becomes an ethical gray area, I think our choice of terminology is really important. So what you're talking about is we're teaching journalists how to be advocates for journalism and how to be advocates for the First Amendment. We don't have to do any kind of registering. We're doing education of members of Congress and advocating for the profession, right? So that's really not lobbying, even if we perhaps hire someone who really is a lobbyist to teach us some of the skills. So that's one thing. And I really encourage us to reconsider calling this initiative Press the Flesh. It just does not resonate well in the current, Me Too era, if you will. I understand the history of the term. It had smarmy connotations historically. And what we're really doing is a public education and advocacy campaign, and there really should not be anything smarmy or anything potentially gross about it. And that's what this name sounds like, in my honest opinion.
Well, I'll leave that. That's something that's for you guys to decide. The lobbying part of it, though, there are chapters that actually want to register as lobbyists. They have said that in the past, and they've had difficulty doing that. They don't know how to navigate it. They don't have funds or whatever. So part of this is also, yes, for instance, when we did this the first time, we sent college journalists to the Capitol to talk to their own Congress representatives on a host of journalism related issues. That of course is just advocating. But part of this is also to train the chapters. If those chapters want to actually have a lobbyist, how would they do it? So it's twofold.
Thanks. And Michael Savino raised a point in the chat. Do you want to quickly air that with the group, Mike?
Yeah, sorry, and I turned off my video because I'm out raking leaves, but I'm still listening. No, I do think, my understanding of part of Press the Flesh is to help journalists understand that, we can do lobbying as long as we certainly understand how to do it ethically and within, what we would accept to be a code of ethics like SPJs. I mean, I do that here in Connecticut. I'm also president of Connecticut Council on Freedom of Information, which is an organization that actually predates our FOI Act here in Connecticut and is a big reason why we have it in the first place. Because if journalists aren't advocating for FOI, open government, and press freedom, I think we're going to have a hard time finding others to take up our cause. Obviously, we can advocate without lobbying, but if we don't have people on the ground, I mean, we have a lobbyist who works with us who's at the Capitol every day when the legislature is in session. If we're not doing those things, I think we're going to have a hard time just using op-eds and social media and some of the other things we might traditionally do to advocate for those positions.
Thanks, Mike. This is a really great conversation, kind of an amuse-bouche of sorts. I think it is super important. And I think, the program, whatever we ultimately call it, if it kind of takes off on a national level, there's a lot of benefit to training journalists how to do this. So I appreciate Michael and his team putting it out there. But why don't we put a pin in that? Because Katie Riggs has joined us. So we'll, if you guys have any, things to add, because I may be discussing some of the federal issues with groups next week, just message the SPJ board thread or me individually, and we can include whatever you want, or at least bring it to the discussion. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad that we had this discussion, because I do think it's important in this day and age for us to have a greater advocacy. And for the new board members, especially, and others who don't know, we're going to do a cost benefit analysis this year of a DC based advocacy team. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time, but maybe this is the year we make some headway on that. Rebecca.
Real quick, I agree with Beiling on the terminology we use. Press the flesh sounds good maybe back then, but today for a woman, it means something totally different. So yeah, I agree with her. Also with the word lobbying. Thank you, Beiling.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Beiling, for bringing those up. Okay, let's go back to John and Katie to talk about the conventions.
Great, thank you. So we're joined by Katie Riggs. Katie is been hired by us to help us plan our meetings, source future meetings, plan current meetings. She'll work with us on our convention, as well as our SDX Awards event, as well as any leadership training events we might have, and maybe board meetings if we ever get back to meeting in person for those. Katie, for your knowledge, because I don't think I shared this with you yet, but Matt would like to talk about overall big picture stuff now that I'll kind of walk through, and then we'll go into executive session later, and hopefully with you being invited to join us to talk more about the financial pieces of it. This is a public meeting being recorded and shared that we'll save the contractual financial pieces for later. So you know where we're going in this next segment here. But I do want to share my screen here if I can. All right. Do you see, let me see, slideshow. You see SPJ future conference suggestions on the slide?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Hold on one second. Okay. I just want to go through a couple things, because one of the things that we are asking the board to think about is where do we have our convention in 2022 and maybe beyond in 2023 and 2024, as well as potentially when. Traditionally, we have held the event, and traditions are only as long as people have been around, and I've seen that we've traditionally had the event in early September. So that's when we've typically held it. If you remember, in a prior board meeting, we discussed and posited the idea of what if we were to choose a city that people think is a pretty good location for conventions and for meeting and for visiting, is a journalism related place, and held our event consistent there for multiple years, maybe 2 years in a row, maybe even 3 years in a row. Would there be benefits to that? There would be some benefits that, pretty simply, common sense benefits, like the staff team would be well aware of the city, some of the amenities around the hotel. So planning and site visits and things like that could be reduced, could be limited. But there's also cost savings hotels provide because they want that business. So in executive session later, the board will hear some more specifics around some proposals that would give us, if we were to stay at a particular hotel in Washington, D.C. for 2 years in a row, for instance, we would save a percentage on certain things and here and there. So it could help us in our bottom line. So anyway, so there's also mission focused reasons why you might want to consider that, especially for Washington, D.C. Matt just said the board is interested in a DC based advocacy team, or at least exploring that idea. Would it be helpful for SPJ to have a presence in saying, well, we think it's so important, we're going to put our national event there for 2 years in a row and really stake some ground there. And we're going to do some lifting, heavy lifting right off the bat to make that happen. So with that being said, I'm just going to give you some overview information here, and then Matt can tee up a discussion as he sees fit based on this. Audit of what other organizations are doing so that you have a sense of this, because it's important, I think, that we know what our peer organizations are doing, given that sometimes people have to choose if they're going to attend one event versus others and things, so on and so forth. I was not able to find ONA's information, so hopefully I'll still find that at some point down the road. Here's what we know about some of the other organizations, though. So for 2022, which is the first year we're thinking about planning, and really the only year we need to decide somewhat urgently, NAHJ and NABJ are combined in Las Vegas in August. NAB is in October in Las Vegas as well. Hot place to be in 2022. IRE is going to be in Denver in June. CMA ACP is going to be in Washington, D.C. in late October. in 2023, you'll see some of the other, so NEHJ and NABJ split every other year, so they're going to be in separate locations. I'm not sure when NABJ will be, but likely still in that August timeframe. And then they're back together in 2024 in Chicago. IRE goes to Orlando in 23, Anaheim in 24. So other than CMA, ACP being there in DC, not many people are going to go back to the nation's capital in our peer organization group for a while. So I think, you know, if we were there, we could say, you know, like we're not competing for the same city against another organization, for instance. CMA and ACP, we're having a conversation on Monday. I am with their executive directors, because if we're interested in being in DC in 2022 and they are there, let's talk, let's see what's possible. So I don't want to, you know, say anything more than that as far as there's no agreements or anything like that but let's discuss it. Is that a possibility? And would that be something good for the organization? I think the board should discuss that as well. Is a partnership like that, could that be a possibility? So that's what the other organizations are doing. I think that's important information for you to have. Some notes on dates. So just a reminder, you know, this no time frame will be good for 100% of people. So, you know, you got to try to think about what's logical from a business sense of when people would be able to come to an event like this. The bids we got for 2022 and even beyond, many of them that are affordable fell over Labor Day weekend. And so that to me is a problem. I don't know that we want to compete with a holiday weekend. We are going to be this year with New Orleans. So I guess we'll see. It could be a benefit, you never know. But in my mind, that's something you probably want to avoid. Also, if we like DC, September and October tend to be more high-priced seasons in that town. So a couple of bids came back because we decided to kind of open up the dates a little bit more just to hear how hotels would respond. And we got a couple of intriguing options around the last weekend in November heading into the first weekend of December. So sort of that Thanksgiving week, and then the following week would be when the event is held. So from my vantage point, there's some advantages to that in that it's late enough in the semester that our college chapters will have gotten enough time and planning where they could have been meeting now through the semester to get a group organized to attend the event. That's a big problem with early September. They come right back to campus and it's almost like we expect them to come right to an event. And if they hadn't planned in the spring to do it, it's kind of hard to catch them at that point. It is also away from election season. This year, you know, we would have been probably earlier than election, but if we're in mid-October per se, during an election year, lots of stress in the profession, lots of, you know, are people mentally willing to go away for a few days? So it gets away from that. It almost becomes like a retreat from that, you know, like we got through it. And in some cities, this holiday time frame heading into it are lovely places to be. Like Washington, DC is a great place to visit around that time. So now I know there's some downsides too. And that's what, you know, Matt's already addressed some of those with me about, you know, the working lifestyle of a journalist, so on and so forth. So I'll leave it there as those are the points that we kind of wanted to address now in this open session. One option could be that we go to DC for 22 and 23 and then head to the West Coast in 24. And we got some great bids from a property in Phoenix. Or we do it option B, which would be DC in 22, 23 in Phoenix, back to DC in 24. A multi-year option could still come into play if you skip a year. So you can still work with the hotel to get some of those same deals, even if you skip a year in between. So it doesn't have to necessarily be consecutive, but you kind of, there's some other benefits to it being consecutive from a staff performance standpoint. So there, I'll leave it at that for now. And Matt, I don't know how you want to facilitate this, but they'll answer questions too about industry trends and things like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know that we'll have a lot of questions now and then certainly when we see some bids in closed session, but I do think this is an important conversation. And so before I go to you, Tim, I just want to kind of tee it up. I mean, I think one of the things that John has done is think outside the box and try to determine if we should move from what we've typically done, which is generally speaking, every 4 years, we kind of go around the country and pick a different place. And now that always isn't the case. We were scheduled this year in 21 to go to Minnesota and decided to change course to eat a termination fee and to move to New Orleans because we thought that would be a better venue eventually. And so the Midwest kind of has gotten short shrift. The West Coast, isn't always every 4 years. But generally speaking, it's kind of a rotation. And so John thought because of cost savings, because of this interest in us in a DC advocacy team, that it might make sense to go back to DC. We've surveyed our members and we've tried to ask them what they want in a conference. Do they care about the city? Do they care about the reporters close to the city that might come to the conference? Do they care about going to a place that they've never been to? Obviously, cost is a huge factor, as John kind of laid out. Bigger cities have bigger costs, but also bigger journalism networks to tap into. And so all that said, I think what I'm hoping we can do today is hear from people in the open session about their preferences, right? He's presented us 2 options. If we agree that going back to DC makes some sense, would it be smart to go on consecutive years and really build a foundation as we're looking at advocacy? I see some wisdom to that. Or do we want to go kind of, stutter step it and go DC and then Phoenix and then DC? So the questions, as I've already been laid out in the chat, important questions have to do with the timing, right? So the 3 big things we want to avoid are 4 big things maybe. One is Labor Day. We'll see how successful that is this year. I think we should not do that as a normal occurrence. The Jewish holidays, which come up every year, and I have the dates for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on here, so we need to stay away from those. And then the last 2 items are finals, as Raphael pointed out, and we have educators on the board who can help us with when finals are. It's not always consistent, but generally speaking, we can kind of shy away from those. And then the election, right? And I guess the 5th thing, and maybe the most important thing, I should have led with this, is partnerships. We've had great success partnering with NAHJ and with NAJA, particularly in recent years. We don't have a partner this year. We'll see how that goes. But there is an opportunity, as John discussed, to partner with a couple of college organizations, which huge upside there. I mean, that's one of the strategic plans that y'all know we have, is tapping into and activating campus chapters and partnering with them. This is an idea that many people have had over the years, and it would be, it could be really fruitful. So with that said, I know that Tim had his hand up, and we'll see if he's happy or not to have Phoenix in consideration. But Tim, why don't you, before I go to the board, why don't you, because you had a question.
Sure.
I'll turn the mic to you.
Thank you, Matt, very much. And thank you, John, for the presentation. And Katie, I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Again, for those who came in later, my name is Tim Igo. I'm the president of the SPJ Phoenix Pro Chapter. And my day job is I edit a monthly magazine called Arizona Attorney. So we cover, as we say, justice and other endangered species. So I'll just put it there. So I think at your last meeting, you probably heard from one of our board members here in Phoenix, Mark Scarp, or maybe he sent a letter, I'm not sure. And he's a longtime SPJ leader at national, regional, and local level. And he mentioned our concern about the idea of keeping it purely in DC. So, and now I'm here because no good deed goes unpunished, I guess. You're now expanding the conversation to look out there, and I do appreciate Phoenix being considered among others. But I'm here because I was surprised to learn, not from anybody on this board, but through other contexts in Phoenix, that SPJ was coming to town looking to maybe have a national conference in Phoenix. And I started to think, our board started to think how that made us feel, like whether we should be looped in. And I know this is a couple of years out, but it sounds like you're about to go into executive session to talk about specific properties and look at contracts. So it's not really that far out. You are the decider, we get that. But I wonder, after all of these years, whether the national board wouldn't be better served by looping in chapters as partners for some of the brainstorming that is going to be necessary. And, you know, for instance, I've been to Indianapolis once in my life. I liked it very much. If I were to say select a conference for you, there might be a very nice cheap property out by the airport, which would yield a pretty horrible experience for attendees. As we all know, and I've been to many national conferences, I'm a big fan. I like them very much. When they're walkable and they're engaging and people enjoy it, and it helps the city put their best foot forward. The farther west you come, the more spread out we are. The cities are more, you know, they're spread out. And so finding those walkable experiences is a little bit harder. I'm sure, you know, Katie, I'm sure you're excellent at what you do. And I'm sure you've been in Phoenix many times, but people who live here might have some opinions on how you can have a great experience, let the city shine, and everybody doesn't have to rent a car when they come here. And that is a challenge. So, so I guess as you go into executive session and you're actually looking at numbers, which is sort of would be surprising to me at this early stage when you haven't come to anybody. But I would ask you to consider whether that's really a best practice for the organization. Having said that, I want to make it clear that I thank all of you for your service. I mean, what you're doing is, I mean, you're in hour 5 or 6 of your meetings today. I appreciate everything you're doing. As I said at the top, you know, you get bashed when you are going to put it all in DC, and now you're looking to put it around the country, and I'm still here to say something critical, but I do want you to know that we stand ready to help you if you come out here to the colonies. It's your conference, but it's our organization, and we feel like we have something to say about our own city. And then I also had some general thoughts about the philosophy of the annual meeting. And I'm disappointed, as I think many of you are, that we fell away from partnerships with great other organizations. And I appreciate that John is going to be opening conversations with some others. So that's terrific. I think we benefit a lot when we're all together in the same room. I think you also are coming off a conference last year, which was terrific. Maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but so many more people could attend because it was virtual and because it was a reasonable price. So, you know, you're not going to be able to replicate that, right? But how are you going to keep all these people who were able to participate for the first time ever who don't have travel budgets? That's a challenge. I hope there's a digital element to this. I also hope that when you go to cities in New Orleans, Phoenix, wherever, we have terrific sister journalism organizations. You know, I'm a proud member of the Arizona chapter of the Black Journalists Association, the Latino Journalists Association, and Asian American Association, because we are better together, because they put on phenomenal programming, and I always learn from them, and they come to our things too. So will there be an opportunity to provide, even if we don't partner with those organizations, will there be an opportunity to provide them maybe a modest discount for those chapter members who are in whatever city we're in, to please come? Please, let's think about them as speakers, right? Let's deepen the panels we have there so that they are, you know, they are more diverse and they really share a lot more knowledge that we may not always get when we're sitting by ourselves. So, so again, I thank you for your work. We stand ready to help you if you ever want to ask for it. And that's it. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Tim. And just so you know, I mean, I think you can look back in our very recent history and how closely we worked with the DC chapter once we had decided to go to DC, that you would be involved and we would lean on you and your expertise. And I think it's a phenomenal idea to involve not just Phoenix SPJ, but all of the Phoenix journalism organizations. So
yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and it's like every city though, Matt, you know, there are phenomenal properties, absolutely. But there are some that are 20 miles out of the downtown core. And so you may have journalists trapped on a property when they'd really like to see something. So I'm just saying, if you're actually at the contract stage, the train is moving pretty fast. So that's all.
I appreciate it. Let me go to board members for comments about the direction. And again, just to kind of tee it up, Lauren, I'll go to you in a second. I think we should kind of, move generally speaking to maybe A or B. That would give us some guidance, or C if there's another option out there, with the notion of focusing in on generally speaking the dates, generally speaking the geography, and generally speaking partnerships. Lauren.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'm going to start with actual little bit of institutional history, because having been around as long as I have, it might be helpful for everyone to have some of that background to help us in making decisions. First, I wanted to thank Tim, and I agree with you 100% that the chapter should be involved. And going back to that history in the old days, and I can only go back to the late 1990s when I was president of SPJ LA. In those days, the conferences were planned 4 to 5 years out, and the host chapter planned over half of the programs. It was very much a chapter production with help from national. And in fact, Dave Carlson will tell you the fact that the conference in '98 almost killed our chapter is how it evolved into what it is now. And so it might be that we have gone a little bit too far away, where we just do our thing as national and are not connected enough with the chapters. In some years we have been, and some years we haven't. So just for that historical context, a little bit more history. The past couple of years might have been in early September. September was really an RTDNA thing. So prior to that partnership, it was either September or October. And as Bob Becker put in chat, and I was chatting with someone who was around in that era too, apparently in the mid to late 70s, it was either in October or early November. Now I'll go to present day. I have a lot of concerns about late November, and I don't support it. I think it's a bad idea for college students. And I'm concerned, I've seen some comments in the chat that professionals, it's too close to the holidays. I just don't support that. I'm very open to the concept of moving it. And if October works better, that's great. If there's a year that the second week of November works after election week, that's great. But I don't think we should go past the second week of election week. I am concerned that people will not go to any location 2 years in a row, even if it's DC. So I do not support option A. I'm not sure if I support option B. I definitely do not support option A. I think that we need to move around enough so that we have members attend, because built into option A is the assumption that people who come the first year are also going to come the second year. And we don't know that that's the case. And people have said in previous meetings, one of the reasons people come is it's also their vacation. And do they want to go to that destination 2 years in a row? I love the partnership with the 2 college journalism organizations. I strongly support that and would love to see us do that in 2022. I have actually been advocating to have a national conference in Phoenix for many years. Feel free to go back and look at old minutes or old board meetings. But it's been so long since it's been there, and it's a great city that I would like to see us there. So I guess what I'm saying is at this point, I support the joint conference in DC in 22 and Phoenix in 23. And I think that's as far as I go at this point in time. And if anybody has any questions about history that I can help answer, I'm happy to do that.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate that. I'd also note, just to expand the conversation, I think if you look at the math, there are 6,000 members of SPJ and 500 go to the conference, which means if you put on your business major hat, that 5,500 people don't go. So there's an opportunity to reach out to them rather than hope that the same 500 go year after year. Also, I would note that if we're really going to partner with the college groups, that college students, you may be looking at them coming every other year for financial reasons. So, I think you raise super good points, but I would just to kind of expand that a little bit to say that we're not necessarily thinking of the same universe of people year in and year out who go to convention. Any other board members? Beiling.
I'm just wondering what proportion of conference attendees are college members?
John, do you know that?
I don't have that data at the ready. I've been struggling to find that, to be honest, Bailing. It seems like when we were partnered with RTDNA, we didn't do a good job of keeping track of data to source out who was who and all that. My anecdotal, people can fill this in, but what I've heard is, I mean, we might get 75 to 100, maybe.
I
That
think
seems
it's
high,
actually larger. I think it's a larger percentage.
So
Are
if
you
we have,
saying
And
70
Andy is nodding his head. Yes, I think it's at least a third, if not close. Well, the regionals, it's over half, but it's over a third, I think, for national. our
okay,
college.
so if we get about 420 at a convention, then it seems like that's historically what we've done. Then it's probably about 100, 110. No.
I actually have,
I don't know the numbers in the 410, again, that over time, that's what we've been in recent years. You know, in the old days, we had a convention on our own and we had 1,000 people. And I know that we don't have that size membership now, but we used to draw 1,000 people, just SPJ members, prior to the partnership with RTDNA.
I just called up our EIJ 19 numbers, which obviously is the last in-person conference we had, and our partners then were NAHJ and RTDNA, so keep that into account. There were 1,884 total participants. 85% were not students. And of those total, 25% were SPJ members, so 473. I don't have the breakdown of SPJ student members, but that gives you a little bit of guidance. Bailing, did you have another question as well? No, okay. Jerry, I saw your hand up.
Oh, how can I say this? So if I'm hearing correctly, we have 6,000 members, but only 500 come to the convention. That's the number, right? But you seem to have had more success when you partnered with one of the minority groups. Is that correct? So why did we get away from that model? I don't understand.
So success, I mean, I'll say this, Jerry, though, our percentage of that total probably has stayed consistent. The reason it's successful is because the minorities groups brought the people, it seems. So yes, it's great from you're there and it feels bigger and more energy, but the portion of SPJers who are making the choice to come to an annual meeting every year has stayed roughly about the same for the last few years, regardless of that. As to why we went away from it, I don't have an answer for that. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we had a 10-year partnership with RTDNA that lapsed in a pandemic year, you know, and the pandemic kind of became a pivot point for a lot of this. It left a lot of journalist groups at a crossroads. And in that 10-year span, 3 times we partnered with NAHJ, and 2 or 3 times we partnered with NAJA, the Native American Journalists Association. Those were designed on a limited basis, as you know, from being an NABJ and NAHJ partner on the regular. And so we tried to kind of partner when they weren't. I think there's a lot of interest now. I think Raphael could, you know, he mentioned unity. I mean, journalists, we can't get together, so we want to party when we can get together. So the more organizations that can make that happen, I think the better. But we're in this weird position where we're trying now that our partnerships ended and we kind of had the pandemic put us on hit the pause button. Now we're trying to figure out, okay, who hasn't set up a meeting in the future? As John kind of alluded to earlier, some groups plan 2 or 3 years out. And so NAHJ and NABJ, I think they're not partnering next year, but NAHJ has already said they're going to be virtual.
Yeah.
I think. So we don't know yet what NABJ is going to do, but I think there's all sorts of opportunities for us. And that's one of the big questions is who to partner with and whether that partnership can be a one-off or kind of bear fruit going forward. I don't know if that answers your question, but it gives you a little bit of the history.
I just wonder if we'll get more attendees if we do a hybrid model. Because Tim, I think it was Tim, I'm sorry, Tim, if it wasn't you, alluded that you had really good attendance when you went virtual.
Yeah.
And so if you do a virtual model, people save on travel costs, but money is still money and it comes into the budget. And, you know, say for example, I mean, because, you know, say for example, someone belongs to one of the minority groups, but like, for example, I don't know if you guys know in this, but the NABJ regional is going on like right now. For the other, for NABJ is regions 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, and 4 is going on right now. Well, I'm choosing to be here because I love you guys and I want to be part of the meeting. But it's all virtual and the attendance is through the roof. It's like 75% of NABJ is in that right now, and they charged a nominal fee and people are in their pajamas and they're attending. So I'm just wondering if we just made the decision, hey, go virtual, people will attend and money's coming in. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I do think that there might be some, John and I have talked about this kind of hybrid models where you do, one of the things we learned from 2020 is that there really is a benefit to going virtual. People also want to get together because it's one thing to meet in a chat room. It's quite another to have the serendipity of an encounter outside of a panel discussion. But a combination could be helpful because I told you the numbers for 2019, 2020, we ended up having like 800 SPJers. I forget the exact number, some huge amount of people attend. And it was similar to what you just said. We had a very nominal fee, and maybe there's discussions now, but maybe you change the fee so you charge people a little more if you can view those sessions over time rather than just go live. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities and question marks to kind of to be written, I think. But you raise a very good point. Any other board members on the merits? Beiling?
I don't know if this is a merit or not, or a demerit, but I just wanted to mention what we're seeing at the universities is a lot of Zoom fatigue. So even though attendance was great for the very first virtual conference, there's no guarantee that that kind of attendance, even virtually, will hold moving forward because we're all sick of the Zooming, right?
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Good point.
And Matt,
great point.
If I could, I agree with Beiling. I think that once we get to a place where it is safe for people to travel and gather, people want to be with other people. So there may be some kind of a virtual component, but I think in the big picture, we still want to be getting together for our conference.
Yvette Walker and then Yvette Davila Richards.
Yeah, I agree with the last. I agree with the last two speakers. I think that there is some benefit to having a hybrid, but again, basically what was just said, taking a look at all those different options. The dates can be troublesome, and I'm just trying to think about it both from a student and a non-student. So in the chat, people have been talking about finals. I think it's a combination of finals and projects, especially when you're talking about journalism students. What we're finding is not so much the finals, but they're just trying to finish their projects. And of course, this year is different because a lot of schools are either finishing at Thanksgiving end, or like us, we're going virtual after Thanksgiving. So, and sometimes trying to get your projects done is even worse than trying to study for finals. So that's one thing. The last time we had a September one, and was that San Antonio? I'm not sure what the student numbers looked like then. The dates, I'm forgetting about the dates, but I know that there definitely were student numbers. I know that depending on when the colleges come back in, if the colleges start mid-August, then I think some students would have some ability to make a plan and go to a convention. If the college happens to start super late in August, then that'd be less of a time. So if you're getting away from early in the semester and late in the semester, that leaves the middle. And of course, the holiday situation too. So I remember when we had something in late September, that might be something again to consider. Seems like we have a big history with October, and I'm not sure why we're not talking about that more. So those are just some of my thoughts. I love DC. I love the idea of DC, but I completely understand what some of the other people are saying. I think starting with DC is important for a lot of reasons. for our effort to have a presence in DC, but also for our opportunity to discuss with this administration. I know that's part of what we were talking about on this agenda. Just having a conversation with this administration and understanding, do you trust us or not? Do you hate us or not? So having some kind of a relationship with this administration, and also having a presence in DC. Again, all those reasons I like DC. So I definitely agree with DC. I think, but I think DC, somewhere else DC, which I guess is option B, is probably my favorite at this point, whether it's Phoenix or not. I thank you, Tim, for coming on and saying that you guys are willing to help. And I know that we definitely will take you up on that. But I think that that's kind of where I am at this point.
Thanks, Yvette. Yvette Davila-Richards.
I want to speak, but I saw John raising his hand up real quick. Did you want to mention something, John, in regards to all of this?
Yeah, I'd say go ahead, but at some point, I think I'd like Katie to kind of share a little bit of industry knowledge that she might have about that can inform some of this too. So
that'd be helpful.
Okay, so then I'll make my point and then we can go to her. First of all, thanks to Tim, who spoke earlier on the Phoenix chapter and is wanting to have a collaboration with National. I know when I was at NHJ, we did utilize our chapters to help us with our planning. It was only not just, I don't want to say fair, but it made sense since they're the ones who live there and could let us know the best sites, the best places to go to. I know on a financial standpoint, then it will be National who will make that last decision, but a collaboration helped out on both ends so that all the work wasn't taken on by just one group of people. That being said, DC, I've always loved DC, but I recognize it's a very expensive city for many people. And I also recognize that the connection to be near the White House and the administration is even a bigger point as well. So those are things we got to definitely look into down the line. We have so many things to consider now. The students going virtual, but for me, going virtual, it's a no-brainer. One, again, financial, it helps everyone across the board. You don't have to buy plane tickets, hotels, clothing, even though that's always the good synergy that we want, right? We interact with people, we talk with people. That's what people love, going to conferences. I know I do. I'm pretty sure you all do as well. But realistically now with COVID and now the surge going back up, this is changing and has changed how everything is done. And so we need to also look into health reasons and for the future of all of us. So just wanted to share that viewpoint. Going virtual for me, it gives us a better edge. Partnering also with other minority groups gives us an even bigger edge because we bring more people into the fold. We advocate for increasing our membership to those who don't know about us so that they can know about the benefits that SPJ provides. And so, yeah, we have a lot to think about, but I'm always here to help out. That's my role here. And so I urge everyone to try to collectively come together to come to an agreement as to what works best for the overall picture, not just for an individual or a group of people. Because my last thought is also, we're focusing now more on students as opposed to the other membership. I just wanted to be clear on that because I see that that's where a lot of the things that are on the plan are for in terms of engaging more the students from our memberships. I just wanted to know a little bit about that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvette. Before I turn the mic over to Katie, and I appreciate your patience, Katie. Yvette, do you have a preference then for going back to DC on consecutive years or on a more every other year basis?
Going to to see every other year.
Every other year. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does, and I'm glad we had a little bit of that conversation before. Turn it over to you, Katie. It does sound like the board, if there is a consensus building, is on that potential idea of going back every other year. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done, and we can talk a little bit more about the specifics maybe in closed session, but to the extent you can share, please do so with us.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. First, I just want to let you know that you may not all know exactly what my background looks like, but I have been doing meeting and conference and event sourcing for over 15 years all across the United States. So I've been in probably most or all of the cities that you reside in and have toured more hotels than I care to admit. It's sad when you can just start to recall like where elevators are and staircases when you start going to a hotel for a second or third time. So just to put your mind a little at ease that this is something that I've done for a long time. A little bit of history on where we did start this process once I came on board with SPJ to support this effort is we created a new request for proposal based on kind of revised needs of SPJ moving forward. So rates that were agreed upon by the leadership that were more in line with attracting student members. Dates, I know that October has been mentioned a lot on this call, and so I just want to kind of touch on a few of these things so that you all know that October dates were our prime and #1 place that we started, giving them your ideal pattern, meeting pattern, and giving 4 different cities. So we went out to 4 major cities that have all resonated with SPJ or with the leadership previously, and we did send that out to them. So that being said, October is one of the 4 biggest and busiest months in the United States for large conference meetings. So those 4 months are September, October, March, and April. Reason being, which I think most of you can guess, is a large part of the country is gorgeous. The weather is great, and you can meet just about anywhere without it being too hot or too cold or running into weather issues, as well as you fall between some of those major holidays. You know, you avoid graduations, you avoid Christmas, you avoid Thanksgiving, you avoid Labor Day, etc. And so those just really become the 4 busiest, most sought after months, which means there's a lot of competition in those months. If we touch on the COVID conversation, due to a large percentage of organizations going virtual or canceling in 21, and in order to salvage their financial situation, they have pushed meetings. And so even if they weren't originally contracted in say 22 or 23, they shifted their meetings forward. And so they may have pushed that 20 meeting to the next open year, or they may have just shifted their entire pattern forward 1 year in order to work with their venue, their city, in order to not lose a large percentage of money. That being said, there is extreme compression in large cities, sought after cities in these 4 months of the year for the next couple of years. So 21, 22, and even into 23, just because of people shifting. You think for about 8 months, we've shifted major meetings out of 20 into those future years, which has just caused enormous compression in the market, which means if you don't have the money, a lot of money to spend, you may not get ideal dates because they're either just not available because those hotels are booked up, or they are just so in demand. What's left is just so in demand that they're not at a place to lower pricing in order to meet us where we need to be in order to meet our members, your members and your attendees where they need to be. So when we did look at those cities, those ideal cities, 1 being DC, 1 being Phoenix, October was extremely hard. Phoenix was a little bit easier, but DC was pretty much nothing. We got nothing back. And so it wasn't that there wasn't effort there, it's just that they didn't have availability, or they couldn't meet our rate parameters for the room rate or the food and beverage, which is what SPJ would be responsible for spending on food and beverage for their conference, So just a little bit of background around there. When it comes to virtual and hybrid, most people saw a good amount of success from the research and the data of what it's showing this year in doing a virtual meeting because it met their members or their attendees where they were at. But as a number of people have already mentioned, we are experiencing extreme Zoom, virtual burnout at this point. And a lot of those conferences that saw high registration, if they offered it free or extremely affordable, actually didn't see people engaging in the meeting. Either they didn't show up at all, or they weren't engaged in the sessions, or they were logging out of sessions early or leaving the meeting early during the week or whatever it was. And so that there is some combat to virtual, right? Besides the burnout, you're competing with their life. When they leave and go to your meeting, when they hop on a plane or get in a car and they go to Phoenix or DC or wherever it is, and they go to your meeting, you sort of capture their time and you capture their presence. Whereas, you know, we're all doing it when they're at home attending a conference, you're competing with soccer or their children or whatever it may be, and they may not get as much. So I think hybrid is really what most conferences are looking at doing moving forward if they can afford it. Hybrid is the most expensive way to meet when it comes to technology because you have to engage your live audience and then you've also got to engage the virtual audience no matter how we decide to do that, if that's the right fit moving forward. I'm a full advocate of hybrid meetings because you do see more engagement from those people that simply cannot, either like you said, they don't have travel budgets, they don't like to travel, they just simply can't that year, but they still want to be engaged. So you will get some of that engagement from those people, as well as you get the benefits of meeting live, which simply can never be replaced by virtual, which is that organic conversation in the hallway, that connection with somebody that you haven't seen in a long time, and just that human connection that we are all craving so desperately right now. So that's just a little bit of background I wanted to provide. And then I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I don't want to take up too much time from the conversation that may need to happen still.
I think that's helpful context. Thank you very much, Katie. Any board member have a question for Katie or about some of the insights that she shared? I see a couple people. Let's go to Yvette first and then Beiling and then Claire.
Katie, thank you very much. So you know, what you said, what really resonated with me is the compression and people pushing everything. And you're completely right. And that is exactly right. So I'm wondering if we decide, if we still want to stay with our DC every other year model, but we can't get the good date in 2022, would it make sense to push the DC part of the every other year into 2023 and start with the non-DC date first? Do you think if we push DC out to do the every other year, we can get better rates?
So I will tell you that when we sent the RFP out to DC and all these other cities, we sent it to them for 22, 23, and 24, just to get all availability, all dates, all rates. Initially, we were looking at just October. We went to DC and there just wasn't anything, unfortunately, within our rate parameters, within a hotel that would be able to actually accommodate our size meeting, because that's another thing to consider as well. There's a lot of cities with a lot of amazing hotels, but they may not fit our needs. Either they don't have an exhibit space large enough, or they don't have a ballroom large enough, or they don't have enough committable rooms for what we call group block. And so that does reduce your number of options. And so we did get proposals back from 4 different hotels in DC, but the October dates were just really tough because it is one of the busiest months in the city of DC. So I feel like even if you select to go to DC every other year, we're going to look at some date constraints, because John gave me then a much more robust option for dates. And we really just eliminated some of those very difficult months, like anything around Christmas, anything around the start of the school year. And really the only other things they came back with was January dates, which I think we can all agree might be a little tough. You still got start of semester for some for university. You've got weather issues depending on where people are traveling from. Even in DC, you could have weather issues, as well as just, it's not a most ideal time of year to meet. So we did do that, just so you know that we went out all 3 years and we have date and rate information for all 3 of those years.
Gotcha. And I have a follow-up question. So Lauren points out that if we do partner with the college organizations, we have a date in DC for 2022. Remind me when that is again.
If we do it with them, it would be October 27th through the 30th.
So if we do it with them, does that mean because they already have a date tied for DC, there's also space for us? Is that
well, that's something we'd have to consider and look at, because Katie did some investigation and it doesn't appear from what she can find that there would be enough room for us in that same hotel property. So if we were to join up with them, we may have to do it in a sense of a different property joint programming. So it's something like that where we might have to think about that if we really want to pursue that option.
Yeah.
Of course, we haven't we haven't talked to them about the size of their room block. It might be big enough that they say, come on in, we've got the whole place booked up. So we just need to do more research on that.
And then the final comment is, if we go hybrid, do we expect perhaps the amount of rooms we might need would be lower if we think that more people are going to stay and choose the hybrid choice?
So I will tell you that historically, when meetings have gone hybrid way before COVID, when organizations started offering that to engage more members, that you typically do not see a drop off from your live attendance, because the people who want to meet live want to meet live. And so most organizations are usually very fearful, or pre-COVID, they were very fearful of offering a hybrid option for fear of losing that live component. And most organizations do not see a drop off, not substantial enough that we would reduce a room block or need less meeting space. And so that's what the data supports in comparing most industries.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Yvette. And before, I think it was Beiling I was going to turn to next. A follow-up question on that. How close, I don't know what you can say where the hotel is, how close are other hotels in that area? Are we talking, blocks and blocks away, or is it an Uber drive, or is it across town? Like,
are you talking to the CMA?
I'm sorry, of the college groups partnership, if that were to materialize in or late October 2022?
Yeah, they have the Grand Hyatt in DC, which isn't far from the National Press Club, so it's sort of right there in the thick of things. So there probably would be options. It's whether they be affordable options that would be walkable, or at least a quick metro or Uber ride. The benefit of DC is that metro system that can help as well.
Yeah, and that Hyatt actually has a metro stop directly underneath it.
Oh, okay.
Essentially. So if we did do something like that, they would be able to get affordable, quick transportation.
Okay, thank you. Beiling and then Claire.
Yeah, so I was thinking about our interest in doing advocacy work in DC, and also our interest in being able to move the conference around to different parts of the country. And that made me think about advocacy with state legislatures and state elected officials. And so I'm wondering if maybe we could also think about, or have thought about, having conference at state capitals, which, gets us the regional piece, but, may not be in the most fabulous, exciting conference city, but then it would also be a lot cheaper, right? And we could do the advocacy work at the state level, because that's really important as well.
Can you speak to that, Katie? How many state capitals where there's a capital OL are viable destinations?
I wouldn't be able to just toss out that research right now. I would say in a lot of cases, you're not going to be in a city that's going to have like a large hotel. It's because it is random how in a lot of places across our country, the state capital doesn't really line up with their largest cities. And so we might run into a little bit of trouble when it comes to finding a venue appropriate for us. We could, so if that became something that needed to be explored further down the road, then that's research that can be done to see if there's some viable options. You also sometimes run into the airport problem. So you could end up in regional airport situations where someone, if you're closer to the East Coast, someone from the West Coast may have to connect twice in order to even get to that city. So then your transportation costs are going up, and the time that people are committing to getting to and from the meeting would go up as well. I mean, it's the same reason most people like to meet in cities like Phoenix or like DC. I mean, DC with the multiple airports, and Phoenix with such a large airport. That's the draw of these cities, is they have these large venues where you can put one whole meeting inside one property. And then also they're so much easier to get to than a lot of other cities. And it just really is more convenient and sometimes more affordable for your attendees.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Claire.
Yeah, I'm just still focused on the basic transportation issue of when will people fly comfortably. And I see all different, I see as soon as 2022, as late as 2024. And I'm just wondering what Katie is hearing specifically about that in the industry.
Yeah, of course. So I actually was just at a panel at a major industry conference for meeting and event professionals a couple of weeks ago, and there was a senior VP from Delta there. And they are experiencing that while they have their sellout rate is a little bit different on flights right now because Delta has committed to not opening any of their middle seats until the beginning of 2021. But they are at over 80% capacity on most flights at this point, and they're bringing cities back that they've already reduced. So what we're seeing in the industry as a whole is that corporations and even some large associations are not holding their meetings, or they're not sending their teams out. Say like Anthem as a company, just as an example, is saying, we're not putting people on the road. That's our corporate decision right now, and we're not. But the transient travel is holding steady. I mean, hotels are still selling out, not everywhere, and there are hotels really struggling, but people are still traveling. And even when I traveled to and from that conference, other than the middle seats on all 4 of my Delta flights, the flight was completely full. So people are hungry to travel, and I think we have to keep in mind that what you're talking about right now is 22 and beyond. And we're talking about vaccines to market within Q1 of 21. Not saying everyone's going to run to the pharmacy and grab one the minute that they hit the market, right? But we are talking about what is testing pretty well with 2 different pharma companies, the vaccine to market in Q1. And then we're talking about travel late in 2022 at this point. So I hate to say this because COVID is very serious and very real, and I stalk COVID because of my industry, but I wouldn't make a lot of decisions for 22 and beyond, specifically around what we're handling with COVID right this second, because we will be in a very different situation by late 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That's a great insight. Any other board members with a question for Katie or comment? I'm not seeing any, so it seems like obviously we'll resume this discussion in closed session, but it seems just generally speaking that there's building consensus around the potential for DC in every other year with a start in 2022 if we can partner with the college associations given the hotel issues. Is that an accurate and I see Hazel has a hand up, but John, why don't you go first?
Yeah, just a real quick, some context around it. So the first recommendation was DC in 22 and 23. And the reason for that was to make that statement. And also 22, if we are with ACP, CMA, it's a good option, as well as it's a election year. It's a pretty prominent election year. 2023 being at that time of year in 2023 would be a good opportunity to get named presidential candidates to come by your event. Since that's when they've declared and are starting, and the Iowa caucuses are just weeks later. 2024 is actually not the best year to be probably in the nation's capital because none of the national journalists are probably covering the election there. And so that's one of the reasons I would advocate that we think about front loading that DC option, especially if CMA ACP comes about. But for what it's worth, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong, but I think that was where my thinking was.
And I don't want to get too far in front of you, but your discussion next week with the college execs, but is there a possibility that they would go back to DC in 23 and so we could resume that partnership for 2 consecutive years?
I don't know that at all. So, but I'll ask for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this board should not feel any undue pressure for multiple years. I think 2022 is the one that we can find agreement on as soon as possible. And to the extent we can agree further out, that's great, but not super essential. Katie, did you have a comment? And then I'm going to go to Hazel.
Yeah, I will jump in there just real quick as we, I know that it was really important to the SPJ board to look at the potential of multi-year deals really for that cost savings and that discount. And while I know that that's a deeper conversation later, as you just think about not making a decision for future years, if we would want to capitalize on those discounts, which can be very, very lucrative, that decision would need to be made at the same time. We couldn't contract 22 and then decide to contract 23 or 24 later. At that point, it's kind of like, you've bought the car, we're not going to throw in the window tint if you didn't agree to it in the beginning. So,
right, that's a good point. Can you, generally speaking, give us a sense on a percentage basis what this cost savings could be on consecutive years?
So with one of our hotel partners that has offered us a very lucrative, they have a great 2 and 3 year package. And even at their 2-year package, you're talking 20% savings on things like AV or food and beverage, which tend to be your 2 really big spends when you come in, right? Like we commit to a room block, but the bulk of that room block is paid for and consumed not out of SPJ's pocket. So really what we're talking about spending money on at the hotel is that AV and that food and beverage. And so it can be a significant cost savings. And I've run some examples for the board to review just to see like that dollar amount, because I feel like it really drives the point home that it can be different. Whereas they may offer a 5% food and beverage discount. They may offer no AV discount in a 1-year deal. You could get upwards of 20% if you do a 2-year deal.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hazel, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, John mentioned what the main thing that was on my mind, which is 2024 again will be an election year. But we had planned to have convention in DC this year. And, you know, that in 2024, it seems like it's never going to happen at this point. Apocalypse is coming. But I think that DC is a good option for election year. So that's what I had wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Hazel. And for those who don't know, Hazel lives in DC, so knows the district well.
Stephanie's on the call, by the way. She's on the phone. She might have something to say if you, I'm not, oh, I just did that. Sorry, Stephanie.
No, I appreciate it. Let's with an eye towards wrapping this conversation up. Lauren, why don't you go next?
I've got a question for Katie, because the motion that I made that the board approved a couple of months ago asked for information about cost savings, not just multiple years at the same property, but multiple years if you stayed with the same chain and moved around. And I don't see that in the executive session materials. So I was wondering if you could speak to that in general terms.
Of course, Lauren, happy to do that. So one of the reasons you traditionally do not see discounts when you just say stick with Marriott or stick with Hilton and move around the country is because a large percentage of all of those portfolios of hotels are not corporate hotels. So they're owned and operated by someone else. So they're a franchisee essentially. And so it would be, it's really difficult for us to be able to do something like that with just Marriott. We'd have to start a little bit differently in the search process. So we'd have to say, okay, Marriott, to our national rep, we would like to do a 3-year deal with Marriott, and we would like a discount across, like we want to see our discounts across the board. We'd have to be way more flexible on cities because we cannot guarantee that there's going to be corporate owned hotels in those cities, and the individual owners won't play ball because they each operate on their own profit margins and they each do business differently. And there's no benefit for Bob, who owns a hotel in Phoenix, to do a joint deal with Debbie, who owns a hotel in DC, when they both make their own bucket of money and they're only going to see benefits of a 1-year contract. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little blurry, but it's much easier to do same property because it's either a corporate hotel or it's a franchise hotel, but it's franchised and owned by one organization that will be making money on both of those meetings. So it's really rare that you can move around the country like that in one brand and see those deals and discounts because they don't like to play ball with each other.
Okay, so to follow up to that, we actually did that with Marriott a few years ago. So could you work with John to take a look back at our records to see what those deals were and if it's possible for us to replicate that?
I definitely can. It'll just be whether or not we could do the cities that, like I said, we would just need to be a little bit more flexible on where you're willing to look to meet more than likely.
Thank you.
Any other board members with a question or comment? Yvette.
Yeah, I just put in the chat. It looks like the CMA ACP was scheduled for Atlanta this year. So if like Katie's saying, if we believe, and I just want to point out that these college associations, they are on it. I mean, they're very organized. So if they were to go in 2020 to Atlanta, I bet Atlanta is somewhere in their future. They probably have compressed it and pushed it out. So, and I get the sense they probably do have a schedule that they're not saying on a website anywhere, but I bet they do know where they're going. They're going to have to probably shift some things because of the Atlanta thing. I mean, it's possible they just canceled Atlanta and ate it, but as Katie points out, a lot of people are pushing it forward. So I think, looking and seeing what their schedule is, might also shed some light on our conversations about a future relationship with them.
I think that's a good point. Katie, do
I
you
can
want to address
also,
that?
I have some good industry partners in Atlanta, knowing that that's where they were looking at going in 2020. And I can see if I can do some back end research, because if they are already contracted in Atlanta, that will be on the Atlanta Convention and Visitor Bureau future calendar of events. And so I can see if I can get some information on the back end to see if we know if they're already contracted out.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Seeing none, I think this is a good conversation. John, it sounds like we're in agreement that a partnership with CMA and ACP in 2022 would make a lot of sense. And I wonder if, as you have that conversation with them, you can ask about future locations and see, which other cities they're going to, so we can get those kind of explore a longer term partnership. Do you want to vote from us today? It sounds like, and can we even do that before the closed session discussion? You're muted.
Yeah, only if you guys want to really dig deep into the financials on the bids and spend some time doing that in executive session. I think today it would be helpful to know what direction you favor, and noting that we will likely do a site visit so say you were to go like, okay, DC 22 in this place, then we're not going to sign the contract today. We don't have one. So we're going to go visit that property, and then we'll fill out the contract and then come back. You may vote to empower me to sign the contract, or we bring it back to you to review. But so at least today, we probably need a sense of the direction you want us to go, especially for 2022.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like then I'd entertain a motion to explore a partnership in DC in 22, and depending on how that conversation goes, reevaluate the DC regularity thereafter.
I'd
Lauren.
love to make that motion, Matt.
Okay, do we have a second? Beiling? Any further discussion on that particular motion?
I don't.
Go ahead.
Don't know if we need to do this, but I know that I love the CMA ACP option, but I know we also talked about looking at some of the other affinity groups, and I don't want to just count them out right now. I mean, maybe if we do go with CMA ACP, then maybe we all have something together. I don't know, but so I wonder if we need to have a friendly amendment of some kind, not to say that we're not going to look at other relationships.
Yeah, that was my intention, and so I would be happy to reflect that in the motion if Lauren would. That we're not limiting.
I did not see the motion as being exclusive to those two groups, but that we want to work toward that. Absolutely open to partnering with others.
Yeah, it's a good distinction to draw for sure.
Then I think it needs to be reworded according to Robert's rules, I think. The motion, I think it needs to be reworded. I could be wrong. Do we have a parliamentarian in this group?
I think Lauren has stated, yeah, I'm the parliamentarian. Sorry, I'm Bob Becker. I've sort of been sitting here quietly and just typing. But I think Lauren has now stated it, so long as it's not exclusive, that we're going to try for CMA, ACP, but we're open to others as well.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you, Bob. Robert.
Okay, so Lauren made the motion. The second, Yvette, did you second it, or we?
I think Beiling seconded it.
Beiling did, okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Correct. This is just for 22 with the ability for you to discuss future years. John, to your question. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Katie, do you want to maybe, are you able to come back for that closed session discussion? Okay. I wonder if there's 2 items left. I wonder if we can give Katie a time certain to come back so you don't have to stick around. Maybe come back in about 15 minutes.
Sure.
Does that sound good? Okay.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much. So two other items, an Impexium database launch, which John can spend a couple minutes bringing us up to speed on. And then just quickly for our new members, I want to talk about the strategic plan and how we can kind of tee up things for 2021. John, why don't you take away the discussion on the database?
Yeah, so Impexium for the new board members is the name for the member database system we have recently purchased to use for the organization, for the society, as well as for the foundation. It is moving us away from a system that we've called IMIS, or it's called IMIS. And that transition has been happening over the last few months. And we are this close to being finalized, and it hopefully by tomorrow, no, tomorrow's Sunday, Monday, we will have the final kink worked out, and we'll be able to send out all login information to members so that they can get on and access the database. And by accessing it, meaning getting into their profile, you could do things on your profile. I know Matt's done it, where you would add a picture, you would make sure your professional association is correct, your phone number, your email is correct. And we want to really spend months, several months, pushing members to get on there and give us that data so that we have the most accurate information about our membership as possible. It really is lacking, to be honest with you, a little bit right now, what our membership, some of those kinds of that information. So there was a technical one issue that we needed a hurdle to bring over, and that was on the membership new member wizard. So when a new member would get on and fill out the form to become a new member, it was just taking too long. Like you'd hit a submit and it would spin for a while, and it just wasn't to our satisfaction. We didn't want people to have to wait that long, and so we went back to them, and they agreed that there's something amiss, and they're fixing that, and so that's the only thing we're waiting on. So once that's fixed, I've been actually working in it already. It's phenomenal. So that's the update on that so far.
Thank you, John. Any questions on this to those who have not been following every twist and turn of this saga? It really has been a saga, years in the making, with chapters upset about the ability to extract data from it. So this is going to solve a lot of problems for us. Okay, a last item then before closed session is the strategic plan. John, do you want to just call up the Core 4 so we can take a look at that?
Yeah, give me a second. I don't have it pulled up.
Okay, or if you give me co-host, I can call it up. I have it here.
Okay, I will do that. All right. You should be able to do it now.
Perfect. Too many tabs. Occupational hazard. Okay, here. Okay, can you guys see my screen now with the Core 4?
Yes.
Let me just expand it a little. Okay, so this is, these are the strategic plan that we put in place, 18 months in the making, approved by the past board and this current board before Beiling and Jerry joined us. Really important for what we are about to embark on now that the budget has been approved. You know, we spent some time trying to figure out we call them the Core 4 items that we want to focus on, and they are being journalism champions, fighting for the First Amendment and FOIA, being stewards of ethical journalism, and then really keying in on journalism's future, both from an innovation and sustainability perspective and in terms of emerging journalists. Now, diversity is a through line that runs through all of this, as you can see. And so I'm really hoping that, in future meetings starting in January and even earlier, to really hit the ground running on a lot of this stuff. As we've talked about, some of the big themes for us this year are advocacy, diversity, and kind of calling more attention to our ethics code. And so you'll see some of the things we've talked about here, right? This is where the rubber hits the road. A GC-based advocacy team, helping student and young professional journalism programs, our awards program. But what I really want to call your attention to is the helping campus chapters. This is part of the big reasons why Jerry and Bei Ling are joining us and going to be a big part of this forward motion this year. And one of the things I'm hoping, I just want to tee this up, this isn't going to be a full-throated conversation on this, but one of the things I think we can do early on is create a task force that I've told you all about in recent weeks and months, with Bei Ling and Jerry and others on there, Yvette as Journalism Education Committee Chair, that can help us, tap into and activate campuses, new campus, so we can get new campus chapters, especially at HCBUs, HBCUs, and Hispanic serving institutions. Really important to tap into those universities and those students. And Jerry graduated from one and he's already started creating a list of those with journalism programs. And so I think, we can really, starting in January or earlier, get this task force going, try to figure out some new campus chapters to set up, because I do think, as we've talked about, if we're going to partner with journalism organizations, as college journalism organizations, this can really be a big focus and can help us with membership, with longevity, and with activation of really a pretty bold movement into 2021. And so I just wanted Jerry and Bei Ling to see this and to kind of sit with it for a little bit. And there's really no discussion or comments that I'm expecting from y'all, because I know we got to go into closed session and have a bunch of
Something to say real quick.
points. But let me ask anyone, Jerry or Bei Ling particularly, if you have questions or comments.
I have already compiled a list of 53 HBCUs, including emails and advisors. So that's pretty much ready to go. There's like 3 I'm still trying to chase down. I'm using my reporter skills to try to chase down 3, but I just have to alphabetize it and it's good to go.
That's fantastic.
So what we'll need to do just really quickly is Education Committee will need to work with Jerry, because there's also a list being generated on that side. So we'll just need to make sure we're working together and not doubling efforts.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons Yvette, why you and other Journalism Education Committee members will be on this task force, because I really do think they need to be working collectively and all moving and rowing in the same direction. So yeah, very good point. Okay, with that in mind, I'm pretty excited about that. I hope you guys are too. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session and discuss some orders of business.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Claire. Seconded by Lauren. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? I think it's unanimous. So I would just say with that, thank you to everyone, especially you, Tim, for taking the time to be here, for raising your points. And believe me, if we're coming to Phoenix, we're leaning on you guys. So tell that to Mark.
I will. Thanks, Matt.
Take care, you guys.
Matt, do you want me to remain for the personnel discussion or not?
Why don't you, Bob?
Okay.
Matt, I need to step out for just a second to use the restroom. That's all. So I'll be back in just 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, because Katie's not coming back till 2:20. So why don't we all take a couple minutes and then come back? Is this our closed session group? I see Jennifer still on the line. Jennifer, I'll email you when we come back.
Yeah, someone needs to stop recording.
We are back. We are back in open session, and I have 2 things to announce. The board evaluated our executive director, John Schertzer, and was very pleased with his performance this year and very excited about the year to come. And then I'd also like to read a statement about the other issue that we met in closed session on, a personnel matter. The Society of Professional Journalists is committed to journalism advocacy and journalists advocating for journalism and each other while preserving members' rights to free speech and due process. The National SPJ Board is aware of an issue involving the Connecticut chapter and the regional coordinator for Region 1. The board had a long discussion about it on Saturday, November 21st. We will resolve this issue with expediency and in accordance with SPJ bylaws and board policy. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you,
A
Lauren.
second.
Thank you, Rebecca. All in favor, say aye.
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 No opposed, no abstentions. I appreciate you guys
Happy
spending all this time
Thanksgiving.
today.
Quick question. Who made the motion to exit?
Me. Oh, no, Lauren.
did.
And I
Then
second it.
And Rebecca seconded?
Yep.
Thank you, just for secretary purposes. Okay.
Well done.
Happy Thanksgiving,
Thanks, you guys.
everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving indeed.
Thanksgiving.
Hey, y'all.
Stay safe. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.